All right, today we're going deep on a true literary giant. I'm talking about a name that basically is the Victorian novel. But what's so fascinating is that behind that famous name is this incredible story of rebellion, genius, and a woman who completely changed the game for writers forever.
So let me just ask you this. When you think of the absolute heavyweights of the English novel, who pops into your head? Dickens, right? Maybe Austen? Well, what if I told you that one of the most profound, most influential voices of all time belonged to someone that almost everybody back then thought was a man?
George Eliot. This is the author behind masterpieces like Middlemarch, a book so good that Virginia Woolf famously said it was one of the few English novels written for grown-up people. But the name itself, George Eliot, that's really just the tip of the iceberg.
And here it is, the big reveal. George Eliot was actually the pen name for Mary Ann Evans, who was born way back on November 22nd, 1819. Now, she didn't just pick a male name on a whim. She had two really powerful reasons that go right to the heart of who she was and what she was up against.
First, and this quote just says it all, doesn't it? She wanted her work to be taken seriously. She knew it had to be judged on its brain power, on its merit, and not just get brushed aside as some sentimental, silly novel by a lady novelist, a type of book she really couldn't stand. And second, she desperately needed to build a wall between her work and her private life, which for the time was seen as pretty scandalous.
So, let's get into it. Let's pull back the curtain on the woman behind that very famous man's name. I mean, how did a girl from the English countryside become one of the sharpest, most formidable minds of her entire generation?
You know, what's just wild when you look at this timeline is how fast her thinking evolved. She started out as this deeply religious evangelical Christian, but she was a voracious reader, and as she connected with more and more free thinkers, she started to question, well, everything. That led to this huge crisis of faith, and she ended up calling herself an unbeliever. And listen, this wasn't just some abstract idea. It caused a massive, painful break with her family when she flat out refused to go to church anymore. That was a huge act of defiance in Victorian England.
And her rebellion did not stop with religion. Oh no. When she got to London, she met this brilliant philosopher and critic George Henry Lewis. The only catch, Lewis was married. And in an age where getting a divorce was basically impossible, they made a decision that was just shocking. They decided to live together, openly, as husband and wife, but with no legal marriage.
The social price she paid was just enormous. She was basically shunned, treated like she was a fallen woman. And this quote, wow, this is from a letter her own brother, Isaac, sent her. It's just brutal. He cut off all contact with her for almost 25 years. Think about that, a silence that was only broken when she finally did get legally married much later in her life. But here's the twist. It's this very personal exile, this scandal, that paradoxically created the space for her to spark a professional revolution. It was her partner, George Henry Lewis, who really saw her genius and was the one who pushed her, saying, you need to stop just translating and critiquing. You need to write fiction. And by doing that, she literally reinvented the novel.
This quote from D.H. Lawrence just nails it. This was her greatest innovation. See, before Eliot, most novels were all about external stuff, the plot, the action, the adventure. But as Lawrence said, Eliot put the action on the inside. She was a pioneer of what we now call psychological realism. She dove deep into the inner worlds of her characters, their messy motives, their secret self-deceptions, their moral struggles. And you can just see this new approach getting stronger and stronger across her incredible list of books. I mean, from her very first work, Scenes of Clerical Life, her insight was so sharp that Charles Dickens himself wrote to her and said he suspected the author had to be a woman because of what he called its womanly touch. And he was right. From there, the masterpieces just kept coming, cementing her reputation.
And then came Middlemarch. Now, the subtitle is A Study of Provincial Life. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's a small book. It is vast. It's like this panoramic view of an entire town, weaving together all these different stories to look at politics, social change, marriage, ambition. It doesn't just tell you one person's story. It tells you the story of an entire society in flux.
And that famous line from Virginia Woolf gets it exactly right. This is a novel that refuses to give you simple heroes and villains. No, what it gives you are complicated, flawed, deeply real people who are all struggling with the gap between their big dreams and the messy reality of their lives. It's a novel with incredible intellectual and emotional depth. So,
Why does George Eliot still matter so much? I mean, why does she feel so incredibly relevant even today? What's the core lesson that she's teaching us from across the centuries? Let's break down her most powerful gifts to us.
Okay, first, she proved that novels could be a place for huge ideas, that fiction could be just as smart and rigorous as philosophy. Second, she gave us characters who feel totally real because their biggest fights are the ones happening inside their own heads. But honestly, it's this third gift, radical empathy, that might be her most important legacy.
I mean, here it is, in our own words. This is basically her mission statement. Her goal wasn't just to tell you a good story. It was to expand your moral imagination, to make you feel on a gut level what it's like to be somebody else, especially someone who's just ordinary and flawed and trying their best.
And this line from Middlemarch, what a powerful metaphor. It's the perfect way to understand her mission. What she's saying is that so-called ordinary life isn't boring at all. In fact, it's so packed with drama and pain and meaning that if we could actually see and feel all of it at once, the intensity, that roar, would completely overwhelm us. Her books just give us a little peek behind that curtain of silence.
Which really brings us to a final question, for right here and right now. George Eliot used her novels to build these bridges of understanding between people. She was always challenging her readers to look past their own biases and see the shared humanity in others. So, in our own world, which can feel so divided sometimes, how can we take up that challenge? How can we practice her kind of radical empathy?